Remember how back in 2016, all of us got hyped about the Spider-Man PS4 reveal? More specifically, remember this? For a long time, this reveal trailer was all we had to go off of, with the parkour snippet being arguably what left people most excited, speculating about whether it was purely scripted or an actual mechanic that would allow us to do sick backflips as we dash across rooftops and smash through buildings. The gameplay reveal of the following year confirmed it to be a mechanic, and seemingly quite a prevalent one, with both the first and the second trailer now each making sure to showcase a parkour sequence which was as flashy as possible. However, when the actual game rolled around, I found this mechanic to come out rather underwhelming. This disappointment isn't exactly beholden to the animation quality, because generally it actually looks pretty nice, and the game does a surprisingly great job at having Peter propel himself between points in a way which doesn't look janky. The problem does however arise when you look at the speed this whole sprint/parkour mechanic holds, or better said, its lack thereof. It's just way too slow, taking what feels like 20 seconds straight of running, hopping and flipping to cover the distance of a single web swing. I get the impression that, in an attempt to make the animations look natural, they record real-life mocap footage of people performing these stunts and then pretty much want them into the game, without much in the ways of exaggeration done to actually account for the fact that you're controlling a superpowered protagonist. I suppose it works in certain scenarios, sequences like the E3 2017 demo or the chase through the alley in the Black Cat DLC, but those are few and far in between. What you'll actually be engaging with the majority of the time that you're playing is grand-scale city traversal, and in that regard the parkour fails you completely, while even being actively detrimental to some extent, since running and charging up your jump to set yourself soaring through the skies would often get interrupted by Spidey seeing the next best piece of geometry and deciding to do a limp little hop over it, completely undoing your charge and making you have to start it up anew. It leads you to essentially try avoid the mechanic entirely, since it drags the pace down to an extent where no matter how fancy the animation, it's just not gonna look cool. People like to often discuss which Spider-Man game has the best web swinging, and to me using that term always felt somewhat reductive. Because while getting the actual swinging portion right is extremely important, if it was only that, things would be a whole lot less interesting. The importance lies within the variety of traversal options you're given and how they can be chained together in fun and stylish ways. Web of Shadows offers a ton of options that are fun to mess around with besides the basic swing. There's wall stick jumps, vertical and horizontal pole swinging, wall running and sliding, including a wall web zip, which will send you in any direction you want, your air dodge pirouette, and you can carry momentum via the black suit's aerial attacks. I exclusively do it with the Jesus pose attack because swinging your fists or ramming your foot into thin air looks a little goofy. DMC4 Inertia Rave this is not. What Web of Shadows is lacking in, however, is grounded mobility options. Your running speed isn't great, and your charge jump is actually meme-worthy.
And that's
charge jump.
do it.
So generally you want to avoid landing at all cost, except for the timed jump that makes you preserve most of your momentum if you press it right upon touching the ground. Spider-Man 2 fares quite a bit better, with its amazing charge jump, which can be charged at any point and expended whenever you need it, and its sprint actually offers a decent bit of speed. Still, when it comes to grounded options, there is room for improvement, and I believe that as long as PS4's parkour worked somewhat differently, it could have easily taken the crown and added a whole new layer of movement for players to experiment with. Now, I am well aware that Marvel's Spider-Man PS4 to PS5 is almost right around the corner, and I am making this video way too late to expect it to have any sort of effect on how the mechanic will function there, but since in my opinion, it's one of the biggest missed opportunities with the first game, I thought it might still be worth giving my 2 cents on how it could be remedied. First of all, the sprinting speed needs to change. It has to be at least tripled, if not quadrupled. Landing on a building in between swings to jump off the rooftop shouldn't be the momentum color that it is. Maybe instead of being a fixed speed, it could be building gradually the longer you run. So if you're holding R2 in the middle of combat or inside a building, you won't immediately go out of control and smashing into walls. The sprint would have a certain speed cap which you'd be building towards, after which sprinting would always keep you at the same consistent pace. Building towards this cap goes both ways though. When dropping out of a swing, landing on the ground with massive speed, the momentum would transfer into your sprint, allowing you to run insanely quickly, with the speed in this case gradually dropping off over time until Spidey is down at the sprint speed cap again. This way, ground into play would already feel way more satisfying and look more stylish, the player being able to throw it into the mix without it ever becoming overpowered and invalidating web swinging somehow. But more importantly, it would no longer actively discourage the player from landing, which then by proxy would also make the parkour becoming a much more appealing option. The change I am proposing specifically for the parkour mechanic is actually rather simple and can be summed up in one sentence. Just apply the point launch to the parkour. By which I mean, implement a timed button press mechanic which determines the speed and trajectory of your parkour moves. It would likely take some getting used to, but it would allow a lot more control and mastery than the current system where Peter will generally decide on his own what he wants to do. And the mechanic wouldn't be beholden to just jump. Malt's game already made the decision to have the square button handle air tricks outside of combat, so I see no issue with having it serve a purpose during parkour as well. Since R2 isn't ever really held in combat, it also wouldn't clash with any inputs. The idea is that inputting X or square during parkour would lead to different results, the former sending you forward at a higher angle, while the latter has Spidey parkouring very closely over the object, with either a vault, slide, or something comparable. Same as the point launch, timing would determine the effectiveness of the outcome, with you being able to just hold X to go high, or square to go low, but pressing the button the moment right before Peter connects with the obstacle will give you a noticeable boost. That way, you'd have actual reason to drop down on a rooftop and use your heightened sprint momentum to rush for a line of parkour objects, vaulting across them and propelling yourself upward of the last one to initiate a wall run, or parkouring onto a higher section of a rooftop and then vaulting off to more quickly drop back down to street level. The possibility space would broaden significantly, and will also just look and feel cool as hell. Though I have yet to play these games myself, the Prototype series seems to be doing a much better job at this whole super-powered parkour business. The animations are of course less precise than those Insomniac made, and I imagine they are proud of that system and how they got the bouncing between points to work so seamlessly. But at the end of the day, how fun it is to actually use during Traversal should be the priority, and I think that animations closer to Prototype would result in a much more exciting player experience and add an entirely new flavor to moving around, which so far no other Spider-Man game would even come close to matching. There are still a lot of other features I'm imagining and mechanical differences I would prefer. And I also quite firmly believe that the city of New York itself could benefit greatly from some more creative liberties taken when designing it. Not necessarily floating platforms or anything, but more connective tissues between buildings which could be interacted with or looped around, since 99% of the time you're swinging through a canyon without much variation. Something like the Christmas decorations spanning across the street in Miles' game could be interesting if your webline would take it into consideration as you're swinging under it. But if I were to go into everything I want out of the Spider-Man game, this video would legitimately span across hours. And stray too far from how Insomniac does it, so I'll leave it at that. Hope this video isn't taken in bad faith or anything. I'm just trying to stay level-headed in face of the hype, and hoping to offer some constructive criticism. Don't forget how the first game used to not have charge jump or air tricks until shortly before completion, since they were only added because fans were asking for it. So if I end up getting any comments on this, I'd appreciate if we kept things civil. I know this series has a very passionate fan base, so Talking about aspects one perceives as flawed usually doesn't go too well. Feel free to let me know how you feel about the mechanic and my suggestions though, or even what ideas you yourself might have.